This video is a continuation of World War III is Here, Part 1. So this is Part 2. And I think of what I'm going to call it. I'm not really sure what I'm going to call it yet, but it's going to be something like Wealthy Elite Families, Part 2, or something like that. So the families that I speak about are present, and they're meaning that there are those that are alive that are still connected to these noble families that have been around for almost 2,000 years or more. And now I'm going to only speak to France and Britain mainly, okay? But there are Chinese noble families as well. There's even Spaniard, and I speak to that a little bit, but Spaniard or Spain noble families, and there's even actually noble families that even come from Africa to a degree. And then there's families that I will speak to that also that are American families that are tied into these French and British noble families. Now, what I explained in Part 1 was that people like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and all these characters, they have serious money. They do. They have a lot of money, okay? They have money that you and I will never see, okay, or never live with or have such great. They can have like some of the greatest pleasures in the world. You know, they can have all the yachts and all the estates and all the best meals in town. You know, they can have the best of steaks known to mankind every single day of their life. They can eat very well. They can they can vacation very well. Pretty much their whole life is a vacation, really. But I mean, they could go skiing lodges. They have private jets. They probably own private jets. They do own private jets, and they can go anywhere. I mean, really. I mean, they can go anywhere. They can have mostly everything they can have, and they live a very nice life. But that's just money. Now, when it comes to wealth, that has to do with multiple generations within one family. And not only do they have money and live just as well as the Warren Buffetts and the Bill Gates and the Mark Zuckerberg poster boys, or girls as well, but they also have power. Now, it's the power that literally changes political policy. They have the power to create wars. They have the power to upset the entire economic markets around the world, not just in Britain or France, but all around the world. They actually have created they created the. I did a video, I don't know, about a couple months ago. They actually created the New York Stock Exchange, as well as Chicago Stock Exchange, as well as the exchanges that are in China and Japan and everywhere, for that matter, in Britain or anywhere, France, whatever. So these are the people that have power. Now, I'm going to name some names, and you're going to have to forgive me. I'll probably just spell out these names, okay, because some of the names I can do, but a lot of names I can't. And what it's basically is, if you want to sum up these particular families that have wealth, you call them basically an oligarchy. That's oligarchy. And what it is a power structure in which power effectively rests with a small number of people. These people could be distinguished by royalty, wealth, family ties, education, corporate, religious, or military control. And most of these individuals that I'm going to name are tied into Roman Catholicism. Actually, they controlled the Vatican or the Pope for centuries. I mean, they controlled religion. They controlled the masses through the religion. And then they also controlled military. They created wars. They even to this day create these wars continuously, and they will probably wars will go continuously on until everybody, like I said in part one, is actually submissive to these particular families that I'm going to name. Now, like I said, there's many other families, but I'm not going to. I really picked the two main, the main British family and the main French family. And there are, like I said, there are other countries that have these wealthy elite families. But these are the two that actually, a lot of those other families in the other countries have also intermarried into these two houses or houses of power or whatever you want to call them. These two families are married into or those other families that are around the world are married into these families, because these families go back to like BC time. I mean, they probably, and I'm not privy to this information because I don't have any of their records personally, their personal records, but I would very much, reason dictates that they could tie a lot of their blood ties all the way back to King David and before that, into maybe even Sumerians and Babylonians, all those guys, all the way back. I'm sure they can go way back. So anyway, and they have royalty, they have nobility. So, and they have the family ties, that is, they intermarry. No, sorry about that. That is the mailman, so dismiss that. You're going to hear some barking. Anyway, that's the mailman. That'll die down in about 30 seconds or so. But anyway, what you have is the family ties that they intermarry. Now, I'm going to only speak to two American families that have married into these particular powerful families. When these two American families began, they weren't really part of this power structure. But what they did as time went by, they actually married into the power structure. And as long as you marry someone within that power structure, you become a part of that power structure. And if you leave that power structure, you're automatically cut off. Everything. You might as well live under a bridge. But normally, no one wants to be cut off from that type of power, so they don't leave families. And if they do divorce, usually the one that, let's say the person that married into that power structure, that family, will be pretty much given some money and told to go somewhere else, and that other person is actually part of the power structure, part of the families, will actually go on, marry someone else or whatever. So anyway, so that's what it basically is. It's an oligarchy. And I'm going to speak to two families that pretty much ran things from maybe 300 AD and onward, and even probably about, I think it's like 88 AD and onward. So 88 AD and onward, and then I'm sure those people can tie themselves into families that were power structures, especially like Egyptian kings and stuff like that. Even that they can tie their bloodline into those as well. So anyway, I'm going to speak to the first house I'm going to speak to is the House of Habsburg, and that's Habsburg. And actually, during World War I, people don't know this. It's a funny thing. And I know my history, believe it or not, quite well. Unfortunately, don't do me any good. But anyway. But Habsburgs, if you trace their history back, they are extremely dominant royal or noble family throughout the centuries, okay, before World War I. And after I would say not even part, but I would say the majority of the reason why we had World War I was because there was an actual power shift there during the turn of the 20th century. And what happened was some of the families wanted the House of Habsburg to be actually like extinct. And so, believe it or not, what happened right before World War I was because of the House of Habsburgs, and I'll speak to that in a moment. They had so many kingdoms over Europe that they wanted pretty much to destroy their power structure and give it to the new, quote-unquote, newfound wealth, which also the newfound wealth is somewhat tied into the old wealth, but still, it was really a struggle there with the House of Habsburgs, and they pretty much wanted to shift their power more, make it more, minimize their power, and then other powers stay in place. And I'm going to speak to the other power as well, that the other family power that continues on to the present. And Habsburgs actually, the House of Habsburgs actually continue on to the present even now. They have they're very powerful. They're not as powerful as they were before World War I, but they're still very powerful. And they still control the military, they control corporations, and they control education. I mean, the Rockefellers were, even though they're sort of new money, so to speak, Rockefellers were into social engineering in schools at the turn of the 20th century. Actually, I speak about that in a different video. So anyway, I don't want to make this video too long, but the first house is called the House of Habsburg. Hopefully I pronounced that right. That's Habsburg. And this is what they were basically all about. The house the house produced emperors and kings of the Kingdom of Bohemia, Kingdom of England, by right of his wife, that is the king, Kingdom of France, Kingdom of Germany, Kingdom of Hungary, Empire of Russia, Kingdom of Croatia, Second Mexican Empire, Kingdom of Ireland, by way of the wife of the king, Kingdom of Portugal, and Habsburg Spain. Now, that they controlled like all of Europe, and that was part of the reason why they wanted to minimize their power, because what was going on there was when I speak about it I think I did it in the New World Order video that I did, I don't know, 4 months ago, and what it was there were a group of British elites, which were also married into British royalty, British nobility. And they had this concept of the New World Order. And it happened in around the 1870s, 1880s. And they wanted to have the power pretty much to themselves. And so they created World War I to actually dismantle the House of Habsburg, because they were, like it tells you right here, they were the Empire of Russia. And in World War I, Russia was actually an ally, believe it or not, at that time. And what was happening was Russia wanted to, I guess this is a word, to disconnect from the House of Habsburg. So there was a lot of conflict within the House of Habsburg at the turn of the 20th century. And then this British elite that wanted the New World Order with the League of Nations, eventually the United Nations, and all this other stuff, also was pulling away from this type of house of power, so to speak, House of Habsburgs. And maybe I might even do a part 3 eventually on this situation here, because I'm not really going into the lineage and the history of the House of Habsburg, or the house of the next house of power I'm going to speak to, and which ties into a lot of wars. I mean, they were into wars and money. I mean, that was really where they were at. And with that military power and with the money, they had some serious fucking power. I mean, serious power. And they controlled the world. They controlled the world along with other noble families around the world as well. Now, I'm going to speak to there's a huge amount. There's a huge list of names in their hereditary line, but I'm going to speak to 4. First one is the Werner II. That's Werner 2, Count of Habsburg. And then you have, this is the main guy, Otto II, Otto II, Count of Habsburg. And now, these are the 2 main guys that really created this whole power structure. And then you had these are 2 people that are actually alive, that actually that have sustained that hereditary line from this House of Habsburg throughout the years, and it will continue on, believe it or not. And the first one is Archduke, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this, Sigismund, Grand Duke of Tuscany, and he's presently alive. And then the other one is Karl von Habsburg. That's Karlvon Habsburg, and he's also alive. And these 2 continue on that hereditary line, and they have serious fucking power. I mean, if they show up at like a Bilderberg conference, or they show up at a Federal Reserve conference, or they show up at the UN, well, they're going to fucking do what these fucking 2 guys say. Even though they don't have probably as much power as when before World War I, they still hold a lot of fucking power. They still hold a hell of a lot of power. Now, the next, and also they've intermarried into other families that are noble as well, which strengthens them as well. Okay, the other, I want to do something real quick. If you just give me a second, I want to sort of do something real quick here. It's, the power structure with the House of Habsburgs is because they intermarried into other families along the way since World War I. They're still extremely wealthy and extremely powerful. When I say wealth, I mean power. And when I say rich, that means you have money. Like I say, Mark Zuckerberg, those characters, they have money, but they have no power. They have no power. It's not like Mark Zuckerberg says one day, let's create a war over there in Iraq. Oh, are you kidding me? He wouldn't even say such things. But if Karl von Habsburg said, let's create a war in Iraq, believe me, that shit's going to happen. That shit's going to happen. Now, the next house I'm going to speak to is the House of Bourbon. That's Bourbon. And the Bourbon kings first ruled in Navarre and France in the 16th century. By the 18th century, members of the Bourbon dynasty also held thrones in Spain, Naples, Sicily, and Parma. That's Parma. Spain and Luxembourg currently have Bourbon monarchs, and I'm going to speak about that in a moment. So, this is the next house of power, or the House of Bourbon, which were extremely, extremely wealthy for, 200 AD and onward, through marrying into other British families as well. Because the key to it is, there's such a thing as, I cannot pronounce this for the life of me, but it's called how's that? Oh, let me try to find that, because I don't want to screw that up. But what it is it's the first sons that carry the title of the family. Let's see if I can. Okay, there you go. This is what it is. So, progenitor, I guess you say it is, progenitor. It's a person is descended or it's the no, that's not. I don't think that's the word I'm looking for. Wait, hold it. Well, maybe. Wait 1 second, because this is very important. Let me see if I find this here. Okay, here you go. It's it's called progeniture, and what it is, the first son is what normally, I mean, they might, if they don't have any sons, then you wind up with a queen, but they prefer to have the first son as the person that carries on the lineage. I mean, that's how it works with these guys. Okay, so anyway, so this is the next house, and this house also ruled pretty much alongside the house of Habsburg. Now, there's other houses as well, and like I said, I probably have to do a part 3 for that, and to show how all the families intermarried, which will probably be a very long video, so I might even have to do a part 4. But I'm going to just name off the names from like, I don't know, 800 AD onward, and basically how it all came together. So first one was Robert of Hasbaye, I guess, Hesbaye. Then you had Robert III of Worms, and then Robert the Strong, Robert I of France, Hugh the Great, Hugh Capet, that's Capet. I'm sure I'm pronounced that wrong. Robert II of France, Henry I of France, Philip I of France, Louis VI of France, Louis VII of France, Philip II of France, Louis VIII of France, Louis IX of France, Robert Count of Clermont, Louis Alphonse, I kind of do that his names, Alphonse of Bourbon, Duke of Anjou, and he's presently alive. Then Henry d'Orleans, Count of Paris, Duke of France, he's presently alive. Philippe VI of Spain, he's presently alive. Juan Carlos I of Spain, presently alive. Prince Sixtus Henry of Bourbon Parma, Parma, presently alive. Henry Grand Duke of Luxembourg, presently alive. Now, those presently alives are all tied into those families that date back to like 100 AD, which I'm sure those families have intermarried into other families even before that. And these 6 people of the House of Bourbon, and they're just 6. I mean, there's many others, but these are basically the 6 ones that are in power. These guys, I mean, like I said, like with the House of Habsburg, if these guys showed up at the Bilderberg Conference, they show up at the UN, they show up at the Federal Reserve Board meeting, or whatever the hell it may be, they're going to listen to these motherfuckers, because these motherfuckers have serious fucking clout, and not only that, they have very serious power. And one of these son of a bitches, all they have to do is make a phone call, and whoever said no to whoever, one of these guys, if, like, let's say, I don't know, let's say the present, I don't even remember her name, but anyway, the lady who runs the Federal Reserve Board in America, she said no to Henry, Grand Duke of Luxembourg, and within 1 hour, he makes a phone call, within 1 hour, she'll be, all of a sudden, oh, she has cancer, she has to step down, or she has some family problems, she has to step down. You know, they'll spin something, make up some fucking excuse, but they get her out of office in a second. So these guys mainly run the show. And now you have the British elite as well, of course, run the show. We know all about that, you know, with the Queen of England, pretty much run the show. And I'll probably speak about that maybe in part 3. But the British elite are pretty much, we know where they're at. I mean, everyone knows about the British nobility, okay? But I wanted to speak to these 2 families because a lot of people think when they think of nobility, they only think of Britain. Well, there's French nobility, there's Spaniard nobility, there's Chinese nobility, Japanese nobility. There's nobility all over the world. And they all intermarry into each other in the families. Now, I want to just speak to two families, American families. There's many other American families that have married into British and French wealth. But I'm just going to speak to two. Well, the first one is DuPont family. You know, like, what is it, DuPont paint or whatever the hell? You know, DuPont family. Now, they married into they're married into the house of, I can't pronounce this, Chatillon, which is a French family, which was a very wealthy family. And throughout the centuries, they maintained that wealth to today. So when you think of wealthy families in America, don't ever think of Warren Buffett or Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg or any of these characters. They're nothing, really. They're really nothing. You want to talk about wealth, it's the DuPont family. There are some wealthy motherfuckers. Now, the other family is the Astor family. Like, do you ever hear of the Waldorf Astoria? These are these characters. And it's Astor. And Cindy Ashley Chandler, Chanler, married in 1934 Princess Maria Antonio of Braganza, daughter of Miguel. I can't do these names. Miguel, Duke of Braganza, and Princess Elizabeth of Thurn and Taxis, Taxis. Hopefully I'm pronouncing this right. Miguel, I don't know. Miguel I of Portugal was the king of Portugal between 1828 and 1834, the seventh child and third son of King Joao VI, or John VI, and his queen Colada I cannot do these names. Joaquina of Spain, and Dona Maria I was born at the Ribeira Royal Palace in Lisbon and baptized Maria, Francisca, Isabel, Josepha, Antonia, or something like that. Gertrude, Rita, Joanna. Holy shit. On the day of her birth, her grandfather, King Joao V of Portugal, created her the Princess of Beira. So the Astor family, even though they were sort of new money in the 18th century and even in the 17th century, because they married into the wealthy family, they have some serious fucking wealth. And then, of course, everyone knows the Rothschilds. And the Rothschilds have intermarried into many families within the British and French and Spaniard and all kinds of wealthy families. And that's a British wealthy elite family. I mean, they were worth trillions in the 20th century, let alone what they own now, as a family unit, not individually. And people think an individual is not about individuals, it's about families. And from generation to generation, they keep that within their family. And what that does is serious power is what it is. And it's power that controls the world in the sense of economies and war and all that other wild stuff. So this is pretty much my part two to that other thing I just done. And like I said, these are just some of the families that run the show, run the world around the world. I'd say there are probably about maybe 100, 200 families that really run the entire show. If that, maybe that's about it. And those families very much run the whole show. And anyone at a Bilderberg conference or at the UN or at the Federal Reserve Board or whatever the hell, could even be the Pentagon, can even be the NSA, can even be CIA, FBI, any of these motherfuckers. Any of these motherfuckers and any of these agencies said no to one of these motherfuckers and one of these families, all of a sudden be missing in action. Believe me, they would disappear from the earth. Quick. All it takes is one phone call. You said no to me? Yeah, no problem. Call. Yes, I have an issue with him. Yeah, okay. And that's pretty much it. You know, and he or she is probably boarded a plane that went to the Bermuda Triangle and disappeared off the face of the earth. Really. That's what happens to anyone that defies these families. This is where it's at. And like I say, it doesn't matter about individual wealth. It has nothing to do with individual wealth. It's about family wealth. And I've said that time and time again throughout all my videos. Has absolutely nothing to do with money and absolutely nothing to do with individual wealth or individual family. It's a collective whole. It's a whole family that branches out into every area of the world, that intermarry and keep that bloodline going. And not only the bloodline, but they have a gentry. That's a Gentry. And what that is, they have their own, almost like their own rules of their own culture. They have their own, and it's not just like, they sit at the dinner table and they eat properly and all that. Not just the etiquette and the whole thing. But there's actually, they only hang around themselves. They only intermingle. They only socialize with themselves. They're not going to socialize with a Mark Zuckerberg. And if Mark Zuckerberg or Warren Buffett or Bill Gates showed up at one of their fucking parties or something, believe me, they would just be a dishwasher. Yeah, they'll be like led into the back room. Have your party back there. Hang around with our kids that are 9 and 10 years old. They don't socialize. Actually, Mark Zuckerberg and those characters wouldn't even think about socializing with these people. Whole different elitist class is even beyond high society. It's even, they're amongst themselves, and they keep it amongst themselves. And the secrets and their personal treasures or their things that they have in life, they keep it amongst themselves. They socialize with themselves, they intermarry amongst themselves, and therefore they're able to continue on with that power. They're able to continue on with that wealth from generation to generation. And every generation is schooled with the best of schools. Like I think they go to Eton, like Eton, college. The best of schools, Oxford, all these great schools, that cost you $1 million a year, just the best schools, best food, best housing, best transportation, just best of everything, really. And that's the way they live. And they've been doing this for over 1,000, maybe 2,000 years. They've been doing that. Definitely over 2,000 years. So they've been doing it for so long that it's just a way of life. It's just the way they do things. So anyway, I'm going to let go of this video, but I just wanted to share with you the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Being wealthy is about power. Being rich is about money. And when you can distinguish between those two things, then you really start to see what reality truly is. Guys, have a good day. Bye.